Hello SMO online speedrunners. This video guide will go over the entire umbrella of how story moon sync works in the mod, and how we can abuse it to do some pretty crazy stuff. Now, I want this video to be thorough, so I'm going to go over even the basics like scenario syncing, which I am aware is common knowledge for a lot of runners, but it is worth mentioning nonetheless, as I have seen this question asked before. To be more specific, we're going to go over scenario syncing, wrong warping, death warping, and Nimwarps. If you want to skip over the more base level stuff, this video does have chapters, so feel free to skip around to what's relevant to you. To start off, I'll just quickly go over what scenarios even are for those who may not be familiar with the term. To put it simply, a scenario is just one story state of the kingdom. To use Sand Kingdom as an example, the first scenario would be when you enter the kingdom for the first time. The second would be after you defeat Harriet, also known as Night Sand, and the third would be after defeating Knuckle Attack or World Peace. The next would be post-game and Moon Rock. But to clarify, not all story moons are scenario moons. Moons like atop the highest tower and moon shards in the sand don't alter the kingdom in a significant way, and thus don't count as a separate scenario. While not a hard rule, I'd probably simplify it to any multi-moon that would warp you back to the Odyssey is probably a scenario change. Now, how do scenarios sync in the online mod? The answer is soon going to be outdated. As of the time I am making this video, the mod version commonly used for speedrunning is freeze tag. The way scenario syncing works in that version of the mod is you get warped to the updated scenario only if you're in the same loading zone as where the multi-moon was collected, which means you can't be in any sub-areas if you want to get warped. The primary issue with this is that if you miss your chance to get warped by somebody else collecting the moon, then you've missed your one and only chance. In fact, the only way to get to the correct scenario after that is to collect the multi-moon yourself, which would then be grayed out, but would still update your scenario. This is primarily an issue in Metro, as if you miss the Mecha Wiggle or Warp, you get stuck in the Night Metro scenario, and end up being pretty much useless during the rest of Day Metro. Similarly, in Bowser's Kingdom, the game quite literally does not allow you to leave the kingdom until it thinks you've defeated the mech, which becomes problematic if you miss that warp. But what was I saying about this becoming outdated? Well, because of the amount of player complaints we would receive about the counterintuitive scenario syncing, the moderators of Speedrun.com, that's me, are working with the creators of one of the most popular forks of SMO Online, that being SMO Online Plus, to create the version of the mod ideal for speedrunning without giving a massive unfair advantage. But just one of the features this mod will include will be improved scenario syncing, where scenarios will update regardless if you're in a sub-area or different kingdom. This version of the mod has been in development for a couple months now, and as of making this video isn't publicly released. But depending on how late you're watching this video after it came out, the mod might have already released, and if so, there will be a pinned comment saying so. Now to talk about wrong warps. It's common for most runs to have players warp to a checkpoint when a multi-moon is collected, so that they can skip cutscenes and better sparse throughout the kingdom. But you may have also seen in some top level runs somebody warps to a checkpoint and ends up at a completely different one. Alright, so what's going on here? To simplify the explanation, all checkpoints have an internal ID, but those IDs aren't consistent throughout scenarios, so the game will always warp you to the same ID, but that may not always be the same checkpoint. Where the checkpoint wrong warps you to is always consistent, so it is implemented into quite a few routes. Though it is also worth mentioning that not all checkpoints are desynced, and some will actually send you exactly where you'd expect. As a good resource, we have documented every checkpoint ID in every scenario, which will be linked in the description, so that you can deduce desyncs yourself. Short answer is collecting a story moon updates everyone's spawn position. Goodbye. Alright fine, I'll give you a bit more than that. So if you go into an unmodified version of the game, a fact some people don't know is that story moons can actually be used as a sort of one-time checkpoint. You can try it yourself. If you collect a story moon and then die, you'll respawn somewhat close to it, even if you haven't picked up any checkpoints. So what does this have to do with online? Now obviously the mod syncs moons between players, including story moons, but Super Mario Odyssey is stupid. The game doesn't really know what's going on with online, and as far as it knows, it just sees, oh, the story moon was collected? I need to update the spawn position! So all of the connected players have their spawn point set to that story moon. Now, a common misconception I see with death warps is that it's a timing-based thing. It's not. I mean, sure, if you die too early before your spawn location updates, then yeah, it's not gonna work. But as for dying too late, yeah, that's not really a thing. Your spawn position is updated, and so long as you don't update it again, the warp is still gonna work. I could run around for 5 minutes, days, years, and just so long as I don't touch another checkpoint or grab my old story moon, or anything else that would update my spawn position, the death warp is still going to work. Though I suppose in the context of a speedrun, the faster you can die, the better. While death warps are useful, they're also the foundation to something a lot more broken. Alright, now we have an understanding of how death warps work, let's use it to its fullest potential. Now we know that another player grabbing a story moon sets your spawn position, but what if that spawn position didn't exist for you? What if you weren't even in the same kingdom? What would happen then? Would the game ignore the invalid spawn location? Well, no, because remember, Super Mario Odyssey is stupid. For development purposes, every area in the game needs a default spawn position, including kingdoms, which for the purposes of this video you can just say is by the Odyssey, or where the Odyssey would be if it doesn't exist. So to answer the question of what would happen to your spawn position, since the spawn location can't be found, the default spawn is used as a failsafe. At first glance this doesn't really seem all too useful, until you think about paintings. This allows you to get to places like early luncheon without the difficult bruncheon jump, or morning metro without the use of a CRC or shooting stars. You are also technically able to get to mushroom and seaside early, but those aren't nearly as relevant. But if you do implement these into a route, please be mindful to grab the checkpoint near the painting, otherwise you won't have a way out of your early kingdom, besides closing out of your game, which in an online run almost always results in moon desyncs. So to clarify what happens one last time, you enter a painting and another player grabs a story moon which resets your spawn position, you then die and get sent back to where the Odyssey should be. And that's pretty much everything that's relevant to warping in SMO Online. It requires a bit of knowledge, but once you have that, it's all super easy to execute. I hope this video was informative, and bye!